enrich those students. But some students may not have gotten here. So I either need to remediate, I need to reteach, and I need to reassess. And once teachers have done all of that work, they stop and they reflect on that unit. And that's the improvement for us. Because now we get a chance to teach that unit the following year. And if we have some flaws, we get to fix those flaws before we teach that unit again. So we're really excited about this process because we believe that this process not only will impact achievement with our students, but as educators, it's going to help us impact and adjust our practices.
Can I ask you a quick question? When you say study and analyze results, what sort of progress monitoring, what might that look like? Is it always a pen and paper test? Is it a...
It could be a quick check. So you have a lot of formative assessment strategies. And so one strategy could be a line of intention that you do with your kids. One strategy could be, we did this strategy with new teachers in our new teacher orientation session a couple of weeks ago. We had to brainstorm things that they had learned, and they wrote them on a piece of paper. They crumpled up that piece of paper, tossed it in the air. Then they went and found someone else's, and they read the list, and they compared what they had learned to what someone else had learned, and they saw, oh, I didn't learn that. Oh, I learned that, and you learned that too, so we didn't have a conversation. So not all of them are paper pencil assessments, but they are assessments that we can gather data from. And I'm going to let Laura talk about our detailed why.
I've got a question, Lyndon, also. In terms of this, planning, do, study, adjust, and so on, how frequently are teachers in a certain grade level, certain content area able to do that together?
They're able to do that on a regular basis because of their common planning time. So during their common planning time, if I teach eighth grade math, I'm planning with another teacher that teaches eighth grade math too. So part of that collaborative planning time with me will take care of me being able to go through these cycles and do study and adjust.
Okay, so they're not in isolation.
Can I also say that the collaborative planning time they have each week, this really gives an opportunity to have kind of a focus on those collaborative planning times. And so we're really going to support our staff, and Mr. Harris and Dr. Noel and I have been talking about that work around supporting those groups of teachers so that they're able to use that time to be able to do that work.
Thank you.
Okay, as we're coming to a close, we want to come back to our compelling why. And this phrase that all students should be afforded equitable access to excellence in education. We have some images that we'd like for you to take a look at. So if you look up here, first we have equality, where everyone benefits from the same supports. Next we have equity, everyone gets the same supports they need, thus producing equity. And lastly, we have justice. And this is where the barriers were removed and everyone has equal access. And so our work with curriculum is, rather than putting the fence back up, let's take away the barriers and make our curriculum accessible to all. Thank you.
Dr. Dean, while we're getting reassociated, we put together here, let me ask you a question in terms of the tools that we're able to access. When we talk about, working with the curriculum, do we have textbooks that match what we're doing, or do we find ourselves that this is the best curriculum, but now we got to get the materials to utilize it? I mean, what's the matchup between the curriculum and the materials?
And so the resources that we use are connected to our goals, what we're focusing on. So the perfect example is ELA. This year we worked really, really hard with a task force team to identify what resources will help us to do that work that we're trying to do. And so those resources are going to come. They're not going to be as a textbook per se, but there'll be libraries of books for students. There will be materials that they have for writing. And so all of those resources are aligned with the work that we're doing in curriculum. So both go hand in hand. It's really, really important for us though to make sure, and that's why we're coming to you with this request around curriculum design and having that coaching and support. This is a pretty large task. If you can imagine, we're talking all grade levels that are EOC courses and EOG courses that are core content in math, science, social studies, and ELA. And so it's a pretty big task for us. But that's what we're doing, is we're gonna make sure that those resources are aligned with the curriculum.
Is one of the questions that I always often get asked is in terms of, you know, people my age were always used to textbooks going home, that type of thing. And we have a lot of folks in the community who are working with our students. And, you know, so in terms of if we have, you know, the teachers have at their disposal all the materials they need to carry out our instructional goals. But then when the student walks out of the school and their mentor or their neighbor or their parent or some nonprofit that works with young people say, okay, well, let's work on your studies. You know, would they have something with them, or, you know, so that's a concern that I've got, and I know this is just a short question because it can take all night, but so how would you answer that, or where are we at with that?
You know, one of the things, and I'm going to put Laura Ambrose on the spot for just a second, if you don't mind. We talk about this a lot about how in social studies, for example, you know, social studies is happening every day, and by the time the textbook is printed, it's already out there. And so there are so many different ways in which we can approach that, not precisely Laura, there's others that want to join in, but we talk about this all the time.
So we are a one-to-one district for 3 through 12th grade, as you know, and so,
What do you mean by one-to-one? I'm sorry.
so they have, netbooks.
Okay.
Or laptops that they can bring home, and so the Chromebooks that they use have Google Classroom and different features that work offline if they're not able to access that. Not that we do everything online, but the example that she's giving, I'm thinking like the Dust Bowl, they study that in 5th grade. And so if they were to look at primary sources, access that either by paper copies in classroom or online, and then they would look at a comparison to a current event. So they looked at photos from Puerto Rico when people were standing in line for food lines. There's a photograph that was almost identical to the same food lines in the Dust Bowl. And all of that could be downloaded before they go home if they don't have internet access at home, and they could do that at home, and then when they come back to school, it syncs back up and they're able to do that.
And I know from the other kinds of areas, there's other examples if I didn't want to just isolate or like there's lots of different ways in which we provide those resources.
So for, in the social studies, and I'll just speak to social studies, any history text, history happens every day. And so it's really strange for me to see kids studying about 9/11. That was a major event in all of our lives. But that obviously wasn't a textbook when we were kids. And so textbooks are updated the minute they're published. And so the great thing about what we have is that we can continuously update the curriculum day to day to match those current events. Because the point of social studies is for us to connect them being citizens and to current events and giving them that media literacy. We can do that with not having those textbooks. Textbooks are actually limiting in social studies.
And we've done that several times this year with some pretty major current events.
Yeah, I guess as an old social studies teacher, and this is back in the Stone Age, but you know, in terms of setting the curriculum, you know, the textbook was there, and you know, we go chapter by chapter, and then you know, your better teachers would do a lot of supplemental stuff and a lot of extra stuff because textbooks would put kids to sleep. But you know, now that we're trying, but a lot of times, you know, the testing was on one side, you know, the assessment, especially coming from the state or from the Iowa Basic Skills Test or whatever, would be on one side over there, and then sometimes the materials that were used by the teachers were something else. So I understand, you know, what you're explaining in terms of that alignment is fantastic. I guess again, in terms of, you know, I'm trying to put myself in the role of a parent trying trace what my child is learning, and you know, if there's, I mean, obviously you can ask the child, but if they're in the process of just learning the material, if there was something in front of me as a parent, then I could help follow along. And so I'm just, and I know you're saying that it may be on their desktop, but I know that some on their
Do you have a question?
yeah. I'm sorry. What the question is that what happens if some schools don't take those laptops home anymore? So
Thank you. I think what you heard the thinking is that we're moving toward a more standards-based instructional culture, and identifying what the standards that we're trying to teach is really critical. And so the material that you use to leverage teaching that standard really isn't as important as it is the imparting of the standards and ensuring that the students are learning the standard. So I think what you heard from Ms. Ambrose is you could teach that standard through a laptop or a textbook or a field trip in some cases. But the core of the work, which is very different than when I was in the classroom, is that it's about that planning, doing, studying, and adjust. When you are a standards-based instructional school system, it's not about the fact that the teachers have imparted knowledge to the students. It's about if the kids learn the information. And so that's the major shift that you should take from this presentation. It's not about, yes, as a teacher, I delivered this information. It's more about, well, how are we adjusting our instruction to make sure that all students are coming along. Parents will be empowered starting next year by us identifying what standards are we trying to teach during a certain time period. And so parents should be able to say, did my student learn this standard or not? If they didn't learn it, what are we going to do to adjust the instruction to either extend learning, because a lot of our kids learn it the first time around, but that shouldn't mean that they wait for their learning and wait for their classmates to catch up. We need to extend their learning, but at the same time, remediate instruction for other students. That's the power of what you saw this evening with the students.
Thank you.
Dr. Nuss.
Thank you.
I have 3 questions. Try to make them focused here. The first question is, there was emphasis on having standardization across the district, west side, east side, and Hawkins zone. So this standardization, will teachers have ability to go beyond that? Is this a base or is this a ceiling?
And so the standards, as they engage in being a part of the curriculum design teams, we sent out invitations to 97 teachers. We have 28 teams, I think is what we're looking at. And so we have invited teachers from all schools, both sides of town, all sides of town, to be a part of that writing. And in that process of understanding what that standard is asking students to do and unwrapping the standard, they're going to have an opportunity to then identify what lessons they're going to teach around that standard. And so that's the power of the collaborative planning that they do each week. And so there's an opportunity for them to extend. There's an opportunity to identify, and a huge piece of this is making sure that we're using student data so that we know where students are and how we want to grow them and where they're supposed to be, and are they there yet? If they're not learning, why? If they are learning, then what do we need to do next? That's our conversations.
Dr. Knotts, I would say it's the base. The more we have a standard, then the more creative people can be. But you have to have a baseline to understand what we're all trying to accomplish. Once that's established, then you can be more creative.
Thank you. Second question. The Bloom's taxonomy was mentioned. The science example that we saw was, I think, relatively low on the Bloom's taxonomy. And so I'm just interested, how high will this curriculum go, for example, in high school? Because we want students to be maxing out on that taxonomy, certainly by high school if possible.
And so we reference Bloom's taxonomy, we reference BOE levels, just so that we're really sure that we're making sure that all of the instruction, or all the curriculum is rigorous.
So that's our baseline. We're making sure that all students are having access to rigorous curriculum. And so it will go, we're going to continue to go as far as we can go to ensure that students are having that rigorous experience.
I hope so. Third question, where is the evidence showing that this approach is effective? Where's the research? I didn't see that in the presentation itself.
There's research behind rigorous curriculum design. That work has been done, so we would like to follow up with you on the research.
Yes, I would like to have citations. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may follow up on one thing that Dr. Knox brought up, appreciate it. His first point, and Dr. Meeks, is more to you, I think, but there's been some, I've heard just maybe some chatter in the community about, when you standardize curriculum across the board and then it flatlines creativity. I've heard of fear of teachers not being able to use their creative energies in their curriculum and finding ways to teach their kids. And so I think it would be really important. What you said was just hit such a sweet spot for me, because I was like, yes, that is exactly what I haven't been able to articulate. And so I think it is really important for our teachers, our administrators, and our public to know, again, and I don't think it can be overstated, that by I don't know what the exact words are, and I don't want to misstate it, but by streamlining or creating a system across all schools, across all districts, that doesn't mean leveling some schools to build up others, and it doesn't mean removing all teacher creativity from the classroom, because I think something has been said that has led to that conclusion. And I hope that we can flip that conversation around to talk about how, back to kind of what Dr. Knox said, this is the base, and in order to have a base, then you can grow from there. And so if there is a way, we need to say that more, because there is a misnomer, there's a misinformed group of our community that is hearing something different. And so I really appreciate that you said that, and it means a lot, and I hope that this is a really limited audience, maybe bigger out there, but I really hope that we can find a way to kind of disseminate that spirit to our people in our classrooms who are working so hard every day and who have brought really innovative things into the curriculum. They aren't going to be squashed. So anyway, so thank you, John, for bringing that up. Thank you.
My question was, again, kind of to piggyback on what Greg was saying, I get a lot of I get a lot of feedback in the community about the books, and I know people want the textbook. So what are we doing to help these agencies, the groups that are working with our kids and after-school programs and tutorial programs? How do we communicate to them or equip them to actually help our children absent the traditional textbook?
I think it would be helpful for us to share what the standards are that we're working on.
Right.
And then they can bring their resources to bear, their creativity to bear also, and what they're strong at. We don't want to put them in a position where they're trying to deliver what the teacher is doing in the classroom. But if they know what the goal is, if they know what we're trying to accomplish, and sharing those standards with them, I think it would be really helpful for them to then be able to support students.
I think it's important that our kids be able to, if they're going to participate in these programs, then we really do want it to be an attenuation to what they're doing in school, and not something that's going to be a conflict for them to say, well, I do it this way in school, and then when I go to my training, I go to my tutorial, it's totally different. So we don't want to create that chasm either. So thank you. And sharing that standard and suggested tools might be a great idea.
Yes, Mr.
I guess this is the 16 years of experience on the board. Actually, I am on, this is one council. I'm going to tell you now, I'm going to let you know, primarily because there are about three, this is like the third presentation that we had on curriculum and things that are going to change. And I'm just not comfortable Some of the things that I heard are very similar that I heard before. My hope is though that it passes and it has the results that has been articulated. But without any of them, I'm just not comfortable how much we put on teachers and our parents and our kids with not that kind of data to I've just been down this road before. So I want it to be successful. I hope it does pass, but I'll be voting no.
I have a quick question. I might. That's good. Can you tie the item we're voting on and the presentation? You alluded to a little bit how they're connected, but specifically, what is the approval here? How does that connect with what you've been talking about up there?
So the first 2 days is professional learning for those 97 teachers to be able to do the work, to be able to write the curriculum. So it helps them, it coaches them, it's side-by-side coaching for us to be able to get curriculum ready for teachers, have it in their hands at the beginning of the school year. So the first 2 days is that. The next 5 days are production days, and so those are the days that we actually do the work. That we're actually, this is our coaching and support and guidance to complete this work. And so this is our kind of a game plan on how we're going to get it done. So as you see, we have a team of 5. There's no way that team of 5 by themselves alone can write all the curriculum, nor should they. We have to have teacher voice. We have to have teacher input. That's where the creativity comes in. That's where the people that are actually doing the lessons and have them, in the classroom with children, that's when we really get their voices and we're able to then say, okay, we're ready to send it out and deliver it. But without having this framework and support to be able to write the curriculum, then it becomes becomes an impossible task.
Very well. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Yes, sure.
Just to make sure I understand, have the standards changed?
The science and the social studies standards have changed.
They have changed.
They have. It's the Georgia Standards of Excellence, GSE standards.
Is
And it's
for the upcoming year, or?
They started changing this year. And so we began doing some writing this year, but we really wanted to be a system of writing. And I think the other thing I want to bring up, and I'm glad you brought that to our attention, is that for an elementary teacher who's teaching ELA, math, science, and social studies, all of those curriculum, those different lessons that look very, very different, curriculum that look very different. And that's frustrating for an elementary teacher, a new teacher. So we're trying to make sure that we have all the same pieces in place for them so that it's seamless when they're going from teaching that ELA for 90 minutes and moving into math. It's set up the exact same way. The curriculum map is there, the pacing is there, everything they need, all of the tools that they need are right there for them. And so the social studies and science have changed. ELA, we have new resources, so we want to make sure that we align those resources. And math, and so it's interesting because our work really is going to be around building these assessments, the formative assessments, and the unit assessments for math and ELA. Whereas in social studies and science, we're really trying to dig into making sure that our curriculum is tight, and then we'll start the assessment work. And so this is really 2 days is professional learning for those teams, just to catch everybody up, make sure we're all doing the same thing on the same page. But the other days are production days where we're actually doing the work. And so teachers are coming in after the end of the year and we're giving them stipends and they're rolling up their sleeves and getting the work done. But we have to have a framework to do that.
Is there a larger group doing this throughout the state? Because everyone's dealing with this, is that correct?
That is correct.
I know there was some joint efforts in the past to establish a lot of this work for people to be able to use. So are we monitoring progress throughout the state?
So we rolled out, so probably Laura and Amy could speak best to this because they're social studies and science, but while the state rolled out the standards, they can roll out the curriculum or the resources. And so that's all on us.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
I have a few questions for Dr. Gann for the purpose of just trying to pull out what you're voting on. Dr. Gann,
Yes.
does the Clark County School District have assessments that are tied to the curriculum that we're teaching, the standard curriculum that we're teaching?
Not at this time.
So when we assess students, when a classroom teacher sits down with a parent and they talk about assessment results, what are they basing that assessment data on?
And so each teacher is creating their own assessment, or the schools are creating their own assessments, or teams are creating their own assessments. And so we get to that, it may look different in one school than another school. And that's the standardization.
We're also using a package program from a textbook company called HMH that measures skill development
That is
throughout
correct,
the course of the year.
but not standard.
So board members, what I would tell you is that the uncomfortableness that I feel about where we are from an instructional standpoint, if we don't have any common assessments that tie back to the standards that we're teaching across the district. That's why the statement was made, it shouldn't matter if you're on the east side of town or the west side of town. We don't have core assessments that are tying back to what are we teaching. And so the assessments so when you go to a teacher-parent conference, the data that teachers are talking about has nothing to do with what's actually being taught in the classroom. It's either skill development or an assessment that is locally developed at that individual school by that individual grade level team, which creates, in my opinion, instructional inequity across the district. That's why we're presenting this to you. So thank you for answering that question.
Sure.
I would also say that in education, the pendulum always swings one way or another. And so if you've been on the board for a while, yes, you may have heard a presentation similar to this. What I will share with you, since I've been here almost a year now, the institutional history that I have been able to glean from Clark County is that when the district was more standards driven and focused in terms of where assessments were trying to take students and identify what students were learning or not learning, that's when you saw growth. That's when you were making progress. You have seen, I believe, a dip in your performance as the lack of structure from an instructional standpoint has diminished. So you've had eras, you've had time periods where you have been very standard driven and very focused. And so if you've been on the board, you're probably saying, I've heard this before. And when it was implemented, it worked. And when it was implemented with fidelity, things were moving. From what I've heard, from an institutional standpoint, there were something called data teams in the district, where teams of teachers came together and they looked at data, and they looked at that data based on the assessments that were tied back to the standard that were being taught. When that type of work was happening, Clark County was seeing progress. When someone told me that there was a time period a few years ago where there was a clear declaration to teachers and administrators where they said the data teams are dead. That was the exact quote from leadership, district leadership. They're gone. And when that happened, there became this independent approach to how instruction was being measured and what was happening in each school. And that is when you started to see blips and gaps in your performance. And so we bring this to you this evening, not to say that this is the newest and best, because we've been here before. People who have a long history in the organization from a teaching and leadership perspective will say, we've done this, and we know that when we do it, we can perform well.
Thank you, Dr. Means. I've heard that before. People forget good things. Under No Child Left Behind, that is one time we didn't have a single school to make AYP. And all of a sudden, like you said, the standard driven, the data teams, etc. And I'm going to say this, and I have to go back and get a newspaper to prove it. I can do it. 14 schools made AYP. So thank you for bringing that out.
And I'm glad that you brought that out, because everything that we're talking about now that's in this community is how bad the system is. I appreciate you going back to when it wasn't that bad. And you and I have had this conversation. You got to talk about if you're gonna talk about the district, we gotta talk about there was a time. Now, what happened, if we slipped as a board, or if I slipped as a board member, but I do know the data teams, I remember going into classrooms, kids could recite the standards. So if I sound a little bit, I don't even know what the word is, but that's why. Now, if you told me something happened, yes, something happened. And I am in agreement with you, but this is the first time that I've heard somebody from this administration go back to when things were moving forward. So we've done some good stuff. Now, something happened, I'll take responsibility as a board member and move forward. But we've got to acknowledge that it was not this slippery slope that we're on now.
If that hasn't been said, let me say it again. There was a time period where you were more systemic in your approach. There was a time period where you were more standards driven as a system. That went away. And when that went away, the system continued to crumble. And so all I can speak to you about is what my needs assessment is as I look at it right now and what we need to do. And as I talk to individuals who are in the organization, who have been here for a while, they will say, please take us back to when we were performing well. But the conversation around the needs assessment has always been, if we stay where we currently are, we're not going to get to where we collectively want to be. This is a presentation this evening to say, if you don't approve this, we will stay status quo. If you don't approve this, then we will stay where we are, which is not standards driven, which is not in correlation with when the district was doing well.
I will go on the record of saying that I will vote for this now, but I don't even think we would have even got to this point if I didn't say what I said, because I don't think people remember when we were moving forward. So for me to allude to what happened 16, if this gets us to a point where we are now, I'm good. I just, you and I had this conversation, but I'm gonna vote for it. I'm good.
No, I don't think this is about an issue of one member voting for it or not. It's interesting. I've had conversations with veteran principals who will say, what you're saying is what we know that this works. We were told not to do it. We were told that we should go in a different direction. And so I think what sparked a lot of this conversation, as well as Dr. Nancy's question of, is this the floor or is this the ceiling? Because I'll go into Board Member Ellis's question of, because I think when people hear, well, if you've been a classroom teacher for the last few years and there's been total autonomy and there hasn't been a system, if there's now conversation of a structure, a framework, people are going to say, whoa, wait a minute. That's not what we've been doing in the past. I kind of like having a model where there's total autonomy. We're not suggesting that autonomy goes away with this model. In fact, you have more creativity once there's a baseline. Once there's a baseline, how you want to teach the science standard is up to you. It's just a matter of, we all have to collectively be responsible for saying, this is what we're teaching from a standard standpoint and have an assessment that can measure it. If you don't, then you're think about this from a parent standpoint, not from a teacher standpoint or a child standpoint. Right now, when parents go into a teacher-parent conference, you have to depend and hope that you have a classroom teacher that's part of a classroom teaching team that has looked at the standards and have developed assessments that tie back to the standards to tell you if your child's growing or not. And again, I want to say this clearly. I've had so many of our principals and veteran teachers and others who will say, what you're saying right now isn't brand new. We know how to do this work. It's just a matter of, we need someone that's going to advocate and lead us in that direction, because we've been led in the opposite direction.
Thank you. We have, this has been a good conversation.
It's been so good.
I do have, hold on one second. Dr. Knox, yes. Go ahead.
I just
we'll
want
wrap this conversation up as quick as we can and move on.
We have lots to do. As a scientist, professor, and teacher, the presentation lost me at "we believe." The phrase "we believe" was used, because I've really tried to take Dr. Means' evidence-based emphasis to heart. And we had 21 slides that didn't talk about any of that. So I assume that there is evidence for this approach, but at this time, I can't vote for it. I think that this would put us in a better place than we are now. But I haven't seen proof of that yet. So call me Doubting Thomas, but that's how I come to this as a scientist, a professor, and a teacher.
Do you have something brief to add?
Yeah, I'm gonna vote for it, but one thing that has not been answered to me is one of Dr. Knox's questions about higher thinking skills. And I know, I'm gonna go on faith that it's there. But it's something that next time we have a presentation, I would really like to kind of up the ante in terms of the examples. Thank you.
Thank you. Then is there a motion on, for this agenda item number 13, approval of purchase of ICLE and RCD?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Davis, second by Mr. Worthy. All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you.
Motion carries.
This motion carries, yes.
Thank you. Yes, it did.
The next item is item number 14. Dr. Means has presented some personnel recommendations.
Yes, sir. My recommendation, the board adopt these two personnel items before you this evening.
I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation on the personnel recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Worthy. Any second to that motion? Mr. Knox, thank you. Any questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is the executive session.
I think we want to go in there for evaluation of the
For evaluation,
superintendent
that's
and
right.
evaluation committee.
Is there a motion for the executive session? Ms. Davis, is there a second? Mr. Davis, thank you very much. All in favor? Thank you.
If you want to.